political dystopian that is centered on. Sorry, I have the wrong thing in my in my prompter. I don't have. I have I have the. I have around 29 books or so that I really want to read in 2025. This list is a mix of books from fantasy to philosophy, crime thrillers, and classics. But the majority are fantasy books because that is my favorite genre, and most of the books and series I really want to get to are fantasy ones. Before I get into my list, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments what books you really want to read this year. For the fantasy books, we'll start there. The first up is Promise of Blood, which is the first book in the Power the Mage trilogy. This is a fantasy booktube favourite, hence why it's here. The blood doesn't give away much, but we're going to overthrow a king and gods are returning to this world, and I'm really looking forward to this. Next up is Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. I've heard so much about Fitz and everyone and their grandmother says that Robin Hobb is the queen of fantasy and she's the best at character work. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what she has to offer. I've been putting off Robin Hobb's work for a while now for no particular reason. I've just been getting to other books. So I'm really looking forward to actually finally getting around to it and seeing if it's worth the hype. I know the world is quite expansive. So yeah, it should be good. Next up is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, which is the first book in the Stormlight archive. What is there else to say about Sanderson? I have the book behind me. I'm looking forward to it. I've nearly finished The Hero of Ages, which is the last book in Mistborn Era 1, and I'll have a video coming about that shortly. So yeah, but I'm looking forward to Stormlight Archive. That's the big epic, it's the one that Sanderson really loves and champions, I guess, and is the one that Sanderson fans really champion in general. I see this series a lot in people's top 10 greatest fantasy series of all time, and even some of the individual books are in numerous people's top 10 books of all time. So expectations are high. Mistborn didn't really live up to my expectations that much. It's a good series, but isn't for me greatest of all time type of series. But again, a video will be coming out about that. Next up is Stephen King, Firestarter. This is categorized as science fiction with elements of horror, but it sounds more fantasy to me. In this book, we follow a family of genetically altered and gifted people as they try to escape a government that is hunting them down. I believe the parents were part of a government experiment that gave them powers. Then they had a child, and that child has a gift for pyrotechnics, if that's the correct word. She's a fire starter, so we'll see how that goes. I'm currently reading The Stand by Stephen King, and I've read Under the Dome previously by him because I watched the TV show. Under the Dome was pretty good. Actually, yeah, I actually really like that story. It stayed with me. The Stand, I'm about halfway through it. I don't know if I've got the uncut or unedited, unabridged version. I'm not sure. It's 1,300 pages. It's a crazy one, but we'll see. Firestar, the premise looks exceptional, and I do like we're on the run from the government premise. Next up is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. This is a controversial one. Oh, not controversial, but it's a divisive one. Some people really like her and her writing, others just aren't with it. We'll see how that goes. I do love the sort of dark academia training, military training setting. I love it. I can never get enough of it. So I think I'll like this. I'll be very surprised if I don't, but we'll see. I'll eventually get to that. Next up is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. This is another divisive book, even though it's won, tons of awards. I know it's not your standard fantasy post-apocalyptic book, but I'm keeping an open mind because I think the premise is actually pretty good. So I really hope I enjoy it. These are books, like some of these books that are divisive, even though they're divisive with, certain readers, I still really hope that I love it. I don't really go into books knowing that I will hate it. So yeah, hopefully the fifth season and the Poppy War I like. Next up, I've got a rather underrated one, and it isn't talked about nowhere near enough, and it's The Councillor by R.J. Beaton. It's a political fantasy that is centered on a scholar thrust into power. She's navigating betrayal, intrigue, and the mysteries of magic. I've been waiting for this book to drop in price for like 5 years now, or 4. It's crazy. I'll admit I was only keeping a tab on it periodically, but still, I was waiting for the price to plummet, and I got one at a good price, so I'm happy about that. I know the protagonist is lesbian and is also a drug addict as well, if I recall the blurb correctly. So there seems to be a lot going on. So I'm looking forward to it. This book always stuck out with me ever since I added it to my TBR years ago. So we'll see how that goes. I really want to get to it this year. I will get to it this year. Like the books in this list, there's 29. I'd say 23 of them I'm 100% getting to this year. There may be only a few that I don't, but I wouldn't be surprised if I actually get to all 29. I'm usually pretty good with this. But yeah. Next up, I have The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu, which is the first book in the Dandelion Dynasty. This is a very beloved book. It is about rebellion and war. I've heard the first book is like a history book of sorts for the series, which I don't mind. The front cover looks absolutely amazing. The premise looks amazing. So I'm really looking forward to this. Again, is another book I was waiting for a drop in price. To be honest, all these books I wait for a drop in price till I purchase them. It's that kind of economy. So it is what it is. Next up, we got The Just of Kings, which again, pretty beloved in the fantasy booktube space. I hear this is like a grim, dark fantasy, and I'm very much looking forward to it. This book alongside I forgot the one that's in the Powder Mage trilogy. I forgot that book, the first one. Yeah, really looking forward to those two books. I think that they're both gonna open up a wider fantasy world for me. I haven't got into the grimdark stuff yet. I really want to. Again, I do have Joe Abercrombie books on my TBR, so I'll get to all of that. This next one on the list is the last in a series in a trilogy that seems to have gone downhill, and that is The Atlas Complex by Olivie Blake. And what is there to say about this series? I heard about the first book, The Atlas 6, through, well, I don't have TikTok, but the TikTok hype bled into YouTube, and then I saw people's reviews about The Atlas 6, and I read it and absolutely loved it. I need to reread it, but it's definitely one of my favorites for sure. But the second book, The Atlas Paradox, wasn't good. It was below average for sure, and I was very disappointed in it. But then this last book, I've been waiting for the paperback versions to come out. So I've been waiting a year for this book. And you know what, with Olivie Blake as well, I like this series so much that I'm actually purchasing new books, which I don't do. Like, I'm getting them just fresh from Amazon, which is a rarity for me these days. So I'm hoping that this complex is good. I've heard that it's not. I've seen the ratings and the reviews for it. I know there's the whole, it leans into the whole kill your gays trope as well, which I know people weren't happy about. And it was like, the episode in the 100 when what's her name dies. If you saw the rating on that on IMDb, it is like 5 point something. I remember when it came out, it was like 5.4, because people didn't like that they utilized the kill your gay trope. So with that, it'll be interesting to see who dies. I did get some spoilers, but at the same time, the book's like 600 pages long, and the spoilers won't do anything for me. So I'll see what's what's up with this, because I loved the Atlas 6, like loved it. I love an academia setting, I love a dark academia setting too, so we'll see how this one goes. Next up is Illborn by Daniel T. Jackson. Again, just like The Councillor and a few other books I have on this list, I've had this on my TBR basically since it came out, and I just haven't got around to it. Shout out to Daniel T. Jackson. He follows me on Instagram, and he actually engages with my content as well. So shout out to him. I am really, really looking forward to this book. There's a lot going on in this book. I haven't read a book about forbidden powers since the Darkest Mind series, which is YA, and even though I enjoyed that series, it's not one of like the best things ever, but I'm really looking forward to an adult version of this kind of trope. I do love it when like powers are forbidden and we have protagonists that are trying to live their lives while trying to hide but yet develop their powers. So in this book we follow 4 young men and women in this medieval world, and they begin to develop powers even though it's forbidden. So yeah, there's lust and war and betrayal, and they're being hunted also, which is, I do love when people are being hunted. It's usually because it's so fast paced when you're on the road and people are after you. Like, stories tend to really, really get going. I know in the Darkest Mind series, when they stopped and they weren't being hunted actively, the story kind of stagnated. So yeah, we'll see. I'm very, very excited for this series. I'm really looking forward to it. I will definitely be reading this. There's no doubt about it. So that's the fantasy that I really, really want to get to, and I have a physical copy of all these books too. Now we move on to the crime thrillers, and the first up is The Bourne Identity. Everyone knows about the Bourne series. I love the films, and now I want to read the books. I love a good espionage thriller. I've heard that this book is different from the films. I'm curious to know what the changes were. But yeah, who doesn't love an espionage thriller? And everyone knows the premise of this, so I won't go over it. But yeah, it should be, hopefully it lives up to the hype. Next up are the 2 remaining books in the original Millennium trilogy by Stieg Larsson. So first up, The Girl Who Played with Fire, and then The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest. I read The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo last year. It's one of my favorite books ever. It was a reread, and it was part of my rereading as an adult series, because I first read it as a teenager and loved it, and now I'm in my 20s, I've read it again, I love it even more. So yeah, but I've forgotten a lot about what goes on, especially in the latter 2 books. So this will be very interesting to see how everyone's doing. I know Elizabeth is in trouble, so yeah, I'm very, very interested. On to historical fiction. I've got one book in this category, and that is The Pillars of Earth by Ken Follett. This is a book that is set in 12th century England, where a cathedral is being built, and the characters and settings, I believe, are what makes this book so great and why it's rated so highly. A few people label this as the greatest book they've ever read, so I have high expectations for this book. This is another doorstopper. It's like 1,000 pages, but I can't wait to get into it. I hope it lives up to the expectation. So yeah, let's see. Because I'm not an historical fiction person anyway. That's another thing. I think this will be the first historical fiction novel. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. But next up, we got post-apocalyptic and dystopian books, which this is probably this is my 1B category when it comes to my favorite kind of book genres. First up, we got The Road by Cormac McCarthy. Of course, this is everyone's favorite, literally. This seems to be one of those award-winning books that everyone from all walks of life actually like and can actually agree that it deserves all the hype that it's got and acclaim. Usually it's the opposite, and there's only certain people from certain backgrounds that like have an agreement about, certain piece of literature or art or music. But yeah, the road seems to be loved by everyone, and it really seems to pull on the heartstrings of people also. So yeah. My next book is a book I've been wanting to get to for ages now. It's been on my TBR for a while. I read his other book, Blindness, last year, and if you've followed my channel, I rant and rave about that book. It is the gold standard of post-apocalyptic books for sure. But this one is Death at Intervals by Jose Saramago. In this book, Death goes on a break, and when they return to work, they try a gentler way of killing. In the meantime, because Death is taking a break, there's a sort of, I guess, utopia of sorts. There will definitely be jubilation about, having conquered death and whatnot. So it'll be very interesting to see what goes on in this book. Blindness was so crazy that I really trust Saramago to deliver here. So it'll be very interesting. Next up's a book that I purchased last year. I haven't got around to it yet. It's The Postman by David Brin. It's set in a world that's been crippled by war, and our protagonist finds the uniform of a postal worker and starts delivering messages to different communities. At least, that's what I think is going on. And there'll probably be more to it as well. I'm looking forward to it, but I keep pushing this one back. So it may be one of the ones that I don't get to, but I think I will. We'll see. I am looking forward to it. Next up here is the Battle Royale by Takami. Is it Koushun Takami? Sorry if I'm butchering that. This is the OG Hunger Games, apparently. I don't know that for sure. There might be some book that's come before Battle Royale that has a similar premise. But this is a political dystopian that is centered on... Sorry, I have the wrong thing in my prompter. I have the the description for the Councillor in for Battle Royale. Battle Royale follows a similar premise. Let me freestyle this. It's the similar premise as the Hunger Games, but in this we have school children that I think is it 100 or so that are put on this island, and they have to kill each other, and it's televised. First of all, let me say the book cover is one of the best book covers of all time. I love this. This is translated from Japanese, and I've had a quick peek at the book, and I can see that during each chapter, someone dies, someone's getting slaughtered. Apparently this is very gory. It is a bloodbath, which is to be expected, but it is part of this authoritarian government as well. So it'll be interesting to see what the dynamics are and how that relates to the Hunger Games also. But yeah, in the book, literally at the end of each chapter, it's like a countdown of how many people are left alive. And so when I was flicking through it when I purchased the book, I saw that and I was like, oh, this is gonna be good. This is gonna be good. If you're telling me someone dies every chapter, I'm in. I'm here for it. So yeah, really looking forward to this book. I'll definitely 100% be reading this book. But yeah, moving on to horror. I'm looking to get more into horror this year. Channels like Criminally have influenced me greatly, and I've added several books to my TBR based on his videos. I've got 2 physical books that I will be reading for sure. The first is A Clockwork Orange. This is a crazy book. I believe it got banned when it first came out or something like that. There was definitely some sort of widespread censorship, I believe, with this book. And it is about a boy called Alex in a dystopian world, and he likes to murder, rape, and more. And he has a gang as well that I believe do the same thing. But however, he is at the mercy of the state, and I think this will be an interesting, very short but very interesting book. I like the blend of things going on with this book. Not only have you got this crazy guy who seems to be on madness, I really wonder what the world is like and how the gang of friends are like also, and how they play off each other. Then also add in how the state have him captured, because the state and the oppressive nature of the state is a very big theme in the Millennium trilogy. I know for the next 2 books I'm going to read, it is a big thing, and so yeah, it'll be very interesting. Next is Blood Crazy by Simon Clarke, and this is a wild horror book where adults have started eating children. The premise of this sounds fantastic. I hope the execution matches the premise. So yeah, very basic premise. I want to see that descent. It's all about the descent. It's all about how everything just crashes and burns when it comes to, zombie apocalypse, apocalyptic books, dystopians, oppressive regimes. It's always about how are we going down this slow descent into madness, and sometimes a fast descent. So yeah. Next up, sci-fi, which I am growing to love more and more because of the Red Rising series. And speaking of the Red Rising series, first up is Morning Star by Pierce Brown, which is the 3rd book in the series. I'm looking forward to this. I'm really looking forward to this. I read Golden Sun recently, one of the best books I've ever read, one of my favorites. This series right now is definitely my top 5 greatest series of all time for me. Like, it is up there. And Darrow, I'm so scared for him because at the end of Golden Sun, madness happens. Madness happens. And, I've got a few comments in my video for the Golden Sun about Morning Star. And so, yeah, we'll see how this goes. Next up is a book like The Councillor and Death at Intervals and Illborn. Is a book I've had on my TBR for years and years and years, and I finally, I can't even speak properly, I have finally purchased it, and that is 172 Hours on the Moon by Johan Harstad. I'm really looking forward to this. I can't believe I finally bought it. I finally bit the bullet and just copped this book. In this book, 3 teenagers win a chance to go to the moon, only for there to be an absolute madness going on the moon. So I'm looking forward to it. We'll see how this goes. I don't know, the anticipation is nuts for this book, because every time I've purchased books and I've gone through my TBR ever since I added this to it, every time it's always just stared at me. I've always contemplated it, and I'm like, is it gonna be this time? And then it never ends up being that time. But now it's finally that time. I have the physical copy. I'm gonna read it. We'll see how this goes. Next up, I have 2 classics. First is Crime and Punishment by Dostoyevsky. No intro needed for this one. I did DNF this years and years ago when I wasn't really ready to read a book like this. I still might not be ready to read a book like this. We'll see. Especially because my TBR has grown so much. But I've had the physical copy for eons now. I got the Penguins Classic copy. So yeah, we'll see. Next up is Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, which is a philosophical and political book that is centered on individualism, capitalism, and it's set in a dystopian America. Again, what's so crazy about this book is that I heard about it through politics and like watching political commentators and people just mentioning this book, but the actual premise of it as fiction alone sounds very promising. So I've had it. It is a hell of a book. Yeah, on to the non-fiction, and as always I read non-fiction. I do have a few. The first is The Portable Enlightenment Reader, edited by Isaac Krimnick. It's a collection of key texts from the Enlightenment, exploring themes of reason, liberty, and progress. And it really just as a door slamming, it really just puts all of it together into one. So I'm really interested to read it. Next up is The Rise and Fall of Great Powers by Paul Kennedy. This is a history book, a very large history book, detailing the rise and fall of great powers, obviously. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this because it doesn't just cover United States and the United Kingdom. It's got China and I believe Portugal in there too. And there's one more. It's on the spine of the book, the countries, but yeah, looking forward to this. Next up is Comparing Religions Through Law, Judaism and Islam by Jacob Nussner and Tamara Sun. Again, this was, I don't know, I'm getting more into theology, and this book just sounded pretty cool to read, you know, just the intersection of law and religion for these two religions would be interesting to read about. So I'm looking forward to this one for sure. And last on the list, which I've started reading as of, well, probably when this film comes out, is Abortion and the Politics of Motherhood by Kristen Lucar. This is a sociological study of the abortion debate. It examines its roots in cultural and moral values, and Lucar is really looking to see why people have such different views about abortion. If you want to see book reviews that I have, on your screen is a playlist of book reviews that I've done. You'll definitely find something in there that you love, and I've probably read one of your favorites too. So if you want to see what my views were about it, take a look. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening.